Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today I want to read from a following book on Japanese studies. Just a moment, and I'll share the front cover. There it is. Um, Japanese Studies in Britain, a Survey and History, and edited by Hugh Kortazzi and Peter Kornicki. Sorry. Um, Now, Sir Hugh Kortazzi has passed away. Uh, so, in a way, I want to read it with him in mind very much as leading Japanese studies in Britain. And well, Peter Kornicki is very much with us, and so I will also want to read from something he wrote. Anyway, I want to now switch the share to the book itself. So I'll stop the share of the cover and share the PDF of Japanese Studies in Britain, a Survey and History. That's the full title. And so off we go. Well, first of all, we've got SOAS, part of the University of London, a School of Oriental and African Studies, as an entrance to the Russell Square campus, which will be very familiar to many people, and where Japanese studies is conducted in London, um, with a history of its own, which is very interesting. So here's the front cover, and it says the Japan Society. It is in fact copyright. This book is copyright the Japan Society, and I have received permission from the Japan Society, of which I'm an overseas member, to read part of this book, not all of it. Okay, and here we are. This is the Japan Society paperback edition, first published in 2016 by Renaissance Books, Folkestone, Kent. There are the details of the ISBNs and so on for hardback and ebook. Thanks to the Sasakawa Foundation for their support in making of this book. British Library cataloging. And on we go. So the book is dedicated as follows: to the memory of Sir Peter Parker's contribution to furthering Japanese studies through his 1986 report, Speaking for the Future. And what do we have next? The contents. Preface, acknowledgements, list of contributors, list of relevant biographical portraits. Part 1, history, with articles as follows: a brief history of Japanese studies in Britain from the 1860s to the 21st century by Peter Kornicki. Number 2, British Missionaries and Japanese Studies in Pre-War Japan by Hamish Eon, or Ion, I'm not quite sure. Number 3 is British Consular and Military Officers in Japan before 1941 by James Edward Hoare. Part 2, Japanese Studies at University. Chapter 4 is Cambridge University by Richard Bowering. Chapter 5, Japanese Library Collections, Cambridge and Elsewhere by my good friend Koyama Noboru. Number 6, Chapter 6 is Cardiff University by Christopher Hood. Number 7, Durham University by Don Starr. 8, University of East Anglia by Simon Carner. 9, University of Edinburgh by Ian Astley, Helen Parker, and Urs Matthias Zachman. Chapter 10, University of Leeds, Mark Williams. Chapter 11, London School of Economics by the late Professor Ian Nish and Janet Hunter. Chapter 12, Manchester University by Jonathan Bunt. Chapter 13, University of Newcastle, James Babb and Joanne Smith Finlay. Chapter 14, Oxford University, Roger Goodman and Arthur Stockwin. Chapter 15, Oxford Brookes, Joy Hendry. Chapter 16, Sheffield University, Gordon Daniels. Chapter 17, SOAS, University of London, Andrew Gerstle and Alan Cummings. Chapter 18, the White Rose East Asia Centre, collaboration in Japanese studies between the University of Leeds and Sheffield, Glenn Hook. Chapter 19, Japanese studies at other universities in Britain by Hugh CORTAZZI. And part 3, Foundations and Other Organisations. Chapter 20, the British Association for Japanese Studies, BAJIS by Caroline Rose. Chapter 21, the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation and Japanese Studies in UK Universities by Jason James, who is certainly known to the Japan Society. I can't remember what his particular role there is or has been. Chapter 22, the Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation, Japanese Studies Funding and Policy in 1985 to 2016 by Stephen McAnally. Chapter 23, the Japan Foundation Support for Japanese Studies in Britain, Ishikawa Yui. Chapter 24, the Japan Society and Japanese Studies in the UK, David Warren, former ambassador, as of course was Sir Hugh. Chapter 25, Japanese Studies in the UK, the role of the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, JSPS, which is a Japanese body, Polly Watson. JSPS is a Japanese government body, actually, which provides grants for research, which I've received one in the past. Chapter 26, the Sainsbury Institute for the Study of Japanese Arts and Cultures by Nicole Coolidge-Rousmanier, and Chapter 27, the Tanaka Fund and its impact on Japanese studies, library collections in the UK through the JFEC and the JLG Cooperative Acquisition Scheme, Jill Goddard. Then we have a bibliography and index. The whole thing in excess of 300 pages. All right, so we've got a blank page there. And now this is the preface by Sir Hugh CORTAZZI. Whoops. Here we go then. Japan has been a relevant and significant partner for Britain for much of the last 150 years. Some British politicians and businessmen have, however, recently been giving so much attention to China that Japan's importance for Britain has sometimes seemed to be overlooked or at least given less priority. This is unwise. Japan has the third largest economy in the world in GDP terms, and in GDP per person, Japan far exceeds China. Japan has a population over double that of the United Kingdom. It has a well-educated workforce, including a high proportion of technically qualified engineers. Its culture, both historical and contemporary, attracts worldwide interest and admiration. Trade between Britain and Japan is significant to both countries. Japanese direct investment in Britain has not only ensured the survival of the British motor manufacturing industry, but has contributed significantly to the improvement of quality standards. Japanese firms have provided numerous jobs in areas of high unemployment and have helped to revive areas in Scotland and Wales, as well as in the northeast, the northwest, and the Midlands in England. Japanese banks and security houses have a significant presence in the City of London, and Japanese funds and financial strength have been vital factors in the growth of the British economy. The Japanese market is not as large as that of China, but it is mature, and Japan has a sophisticated economy. It is true that today Japan faces testing times. Prime Minister Abe's three arrows. Abe was Prime Minister at the time of writing. Of course, he's since died. Prime Minister Abe's three arrows, fiscal stimulus, monetary easing, and structural reforms, have not yet overcome deflation. Japan feels threatened by the growth of China's defense capability, and troublesome issues with China have yet to be resolved. That's certainly still the case, isn't it? But through its location and its economic and political power, Japan is of strategic importance to peace in Asia. Japan is, moreover, a parliamentary democracy, and the rule of law prevails. The same cannot be said of China. As a country with world political and economic interests, it is important that British people should have a good understanding of modern Japan. Britain needs a core of Japanese experts to work in business, diplomacy, finance, and education. It is sometimes argued that business in Japan can be done in English, both in government and in commerce, and that knowledge of the Japanese language is a luxury. Anyone who has lived or worked in Japan knows that this is nonsense. Japanese are meticulous in negotiations, and interpreters and translators may not be able to convey the nuances correctly. Moreover, those who deal with Japanese officials and businessmen know the importance of understanding Japanese ways of thinking. What is more, few Japanese politicians are fluent in English. These are some of the reasons why the Foreign and Commonwealth Office every year arranges for members of the diplomatic service to study Japanese and ensures that a high proportion of officers serving in Japan are qualified in the language. Provision for Japanese studies has been the subject since the war of a number of official reviews, which are summarized in the introduction by my co-editor, Peter Kornicki. The last such review was by Sir Peter Parker in 1986. His report, entitled Speaking for the Future, drew attention to the poor supply of experts in Japanese and recommended that a monitoring group should be set up to keep an eye on developments in Japanese studies. This, unfortunately, did not happen. This book takes an in-depth look at the study of Japan in contemporary Britain, concentrating on the universities where Japanese studies are an honours degree subject. It also summarizes the history of Japanese scholarship in Britain and draws attention to the key players and benchmarks that facilitated and underpinned the quality of scholarship achieved. It grew out of an essay on Japanese studies at Cambridge University prepared by Richard Bowring for another purpose. This suggested the need for a survey of current provision across the country and the contributions made by foundations and other organizations. A further spur to investigating the present state of Japanese studies was a report last year that the Japanese government was considering putting funds into the promotion of Japanese studies in other countries. There was no early prospect of Japanese government funds becoming available for Japanese studies in the UK, but no British or Japanese organization seemed at the time to have a clear picture either of the present state of Japanese studies in the UK or of how they had developed in the past. Hence the need for a book such as this. Peter Kornicki and I are indebted to the many scholars and other writers who contributed to this volume, all of whom were asked to write to the same brief. Their contributions provide insights into both the strengths and weaknesses of the study of Japan in Britain. Several of the writers have drawn attention to the structural problems in British universities. In his historical survey and introduction, Peter Kornicki, my co-editor, summarizes not only the history of Japanese studies by British scholars, but also their present state. What do we mean by Japanese studies? In the first instance, it means learning the language in its spoken and written forms. But while language ability is an essential tool, it is for most people the beginning, not the end, of Japanese studies. Anyone who wants to understand Japan needs also to study Japanese culture and history. By culture, we mean to encompass society and behavior, as well as literature and art. Since society is governed by the political and economic systems of the day, Japanese studies are accordingly inextricably bound up with multiple academic disciplines. Unfortunately, studying a foreign language is no longer a requirement in schools and universities in Britain, and we are in danger of becoming a nation of monoglots, speaking only one language, of course. This is in spite of the fact that expertise in foreign languages is in the national interest and, at the same time, the only way to come to grips with the mentalities of people whose mother tongue is not English. And of course, studying a foreign language is an essential tool to understanding English and recognizing the nuances in meaning and constructions. Are Japanese studies in Britain in a healthy state? This survey may seem to show that there are a sufficient number of universities where Japanese studies can be taken to degree level to meet student demand. But while the main centers teaching Japanese languages to degree level have staff with knowledge of the main aspects of Japanese culture, some of the newer centers with limited staff may find it difficult to ensure that their students gain as broad an understanding of Japanese history and culture as in my view they should. The situation would be much worse if it had not been for the generous help given by Japanese organizations such as the Japan Foundation, the Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation and the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation, the Japan Foundation being an official Japanese government body promoting Japan abroad. A comparison with the state of Japanese studies in other Western countries shows that there is no basis for British complacency. In France and Germany, an increasing number of young people are studying Japanese, and levels of scholarship are high. Japanese studies in the USA are mainstream in most universities, and scholarly publications about Japan have proliferated. What are the principal problems and weaknesses? The main centers are constrained by the government insistence that the only criterion for funding is meeting the demands of the market. It is right that students who are likely to be saddled with significant debts on graduation should dictate aspects of their university education. But they will understandably be inclined to choose courses which are likely to help them find gainful employment. Finding a job has in the past been a particular problem for graduates in Japanese studies, as British firms involved in the Japanese market have looked more for business training and commercial skills than language ability. One positive result of this has been the development of joint honours degrees in Japanese with business studies and other subjects. Japanese investment in Britain and the growth in the tourist trade have helped to provide more opportunities for graduates in Japanese studies, making the job problem now less acute. But if the job opportunities decline, Japanese studies centres will be forced under the present market-driven system to cut staff and coverage of Japanese studies. This could be damaging to the long-term national interest and reinforces the case for official protection to maintain Japanese and other minority subjects of national interest for which demand declines or for which jobs are difficult to find. One result of leaving everything to the market is that universities will decide on courses they will offer and on staff they will employ solely on the basis of cost and income earned. Decisions will accordingly be made, I think that it should be, without considering the long-term strategic interests of the UK and of the importance of Japanese studies to this country. The most egregious example of this sort of short-term thinking was the decision to close the East Asia Centre at Durham University in 2003. In our view, there should be a body tasked with maintaining oversight over the provision of Japanese studies and other subjects of strategic and national importance in Britain, and ensuring that decisions taken by universities take due account of the national interest. The costs of taking a degree in Japanese studies, which include the costs of a year in Japan and the consequent student debt burden, have further consequences. They are likely to deter all but those aiming to make a career in academia from staying on at university to take master's degrees or doctorates. This means that the pool of potential applicants for the most senior academic posts is restricted, and universities may have to depend on applicants from the United States, where greater resources are available for Japanese studies. However, universities have recently had significant difficulty in getting visas and work permits for teachers and researchers from outside the EU. This affects their ability to provide both the teaching and research needed for the healthy development of Japanese studies in this country. The problems facing Japanese studies are not solely caused by reliance on student demand and restrictive visa policies. Some issues are the result of the way in which Japanese studies in Britain have developed over recent years. If Britain were starting Japanese courses from scratch, would we have chosen the present division and allocation of teaching and research posts, or would we have decided on a more logical and perhaps more streamlined system with most work in a specific field concentrated in one university? Specialisms have from time to time developed because an academic at an institution has an interest or bent for some particular aspect of Japanese studies. This is understandable and inevitable, but it may mean that some aspects of Japanese studies particularly relevant to the national interest may be overlooked or not given the attention they deserve and need. The British Association for Japanese Studies, BAJS, provides a forum for coordination and collaboration. The Japan Library Group ensures that limited library sources can be shared. Increased availability of digitalized texts and books has significantly helped. There are close links between the universities of Sheffield and Leeds, which were cemented by the establishment of the White Rose Centre. SISJAC, S-I-S-J-A-C, in Norwich, works closely with SOAS. Is there scope for closer cooperation elsewhere? In guiding researchers in their choice of topics, is enough thought given by supervisors and students to national interests? It may be argued that any study which contributes to a better understanding of some aspect of Japanese culture and society is in the national interest. But the Treasury is unlikely to see this as justifying funding out of national taxation. The Economic and Social Research Council, on whose board I once served, tends to take a more focused approach, but its funding is inevitably more responsive than purposive. Those directing and encouraging research, while taking a broad and liberal approach which will encourage research, need to ask themselves, and prospective researchers will need to think carefully about, how the area of their proposed research contributes to the national interest. It would be wrong to focus too narrowly on utility, but anyone undertaking research who is dependent on public funds needs to bear in mind that he or she has a duty to justify what he or she is doing, and to be able to show that it is of benefit to others as well as to himself or herself. One area of national interest which has so far been overlooked in our universities, or at least has been given inadequate attention, is the history of Britain's relations with Japan in the second half of the 20th century. Trade friction was a major factor, particularly in the 1960s and 1970s. Japanese finance has been significant in the city. Japanese investments in British manufacturing industry have not only increased employment opportunities, but improved quality and engineering skills. British investment in Japan has been an important factor in our trade with Japan. And yet there is no centre in the UK focusing on research in these important areas of Anglo-Japanese interest. Peter Kornicki and I hope that this book will provide a useful snapshot of the state of Japanese studies in Britain today. We also hope that it will prompt discussion by those responsible, directly and indirectly, for Japanese studies in the UK, and will lead to deepening and strengthening those studies in ways that will contribute to better understanding and closer cooperation between the UK and Japan today and in the future. Hugh CORTAZZI. Date not given there, but this snapshot is from, well, the book was published in 2016, so I think we could take it that it was from that time. I'll just briefly say how my interest in Japan was stimulated, but perhaps I'll leave that to the end of this video. Okay, acknowledgements. The editors wish to thank all the contributors for the time and effort they have devoted to preparing accounts of Japanese studies at their institutions. They also wish to thank the representatives of organizations which have done so much to help and promote Japanese studies in the United Kingdom for providing descriptions of the contributions which their organizations have made. Special thanks are due to the Japan Society and to the Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation for sponsoring the publication of this book, and to Stephen McAnally for his help and advice during the development of this project. Okay, another blank page here. And then the list of contributors. I'm not going to read anything more than just the names here. If you want to read about them, I recommend you pause the video and read yourself. So anyway, here are the contributors, starting from Ian Astley. Next, James Babb, Richard Bowring, Jonathan Bunt, Sir Hugh CORTAZZI, Alan Cummings, Gordon Daniels, Andrew Gerstle, Jill Goddard, Roger Goodman, Joy Hendry, James Hoare, Christopher Hood, Glenn D. Hook, Janet Hunter, Hamish Ion or Ion, I'm not sure which, Ishikawa Yui, Jason James, Simon Kana, or perhaps Kana, I can't remember, Peter Kornicki, Noboru Koyama, Stephen McAnally, Ian Nish, the late Ian Nish, Professor Emeritus of International History at LSE, Helen Parker, Caroline Rose, Nicole Coolidge-Rousmaniere, Joanne Smith Finley, Don Starr, Arthur Stockwin, Sir David Warren, Polly Watson, Mark Williams, Urs Matthias Zachmann. I think that's all of them. I've met some of those. They're not all still with us, unfortunately. Sir Hugh and Ian Nish, notably. And this is a list of relevant biographical portraits. All right, so this is from Britain and Japan yes, many of these references are to the series Britain and Japan Biographical Portraits. It says here, Roman numerals refer to the volumes in the series Britain and Japan Biographical Portraits. B.ENV refers to Hugh CORTAZZI edited British Envoys in Japan, 1859 to 1972. Folkestone Global Oriental, 2004. T&P refers to Hugh CORTAZZI and Gordon Daniels, edited Britain and Japan, 1859 to 1991, Themes and Personalities, London Routledge, 1991. EXP refers to Hugh CORTAZZI, edited Japan Experiences, 50 Years, 100 Views, Post-War Japan Through British Eyes, 1945 to 2000. Richmond, Surrey, Japan Library, 2001. All right, so we then have a list of famous names in Japanese studies, some of them historical. So Alcock, Sir Rutherford, Allen, G.C., Alan Lewis, Anderson William, Aston W.G., Batchelor John, Beasley W.G., Professor Bill Beasley as he was known, Blacker Carmen, Bowness Geoffrey, Boxer Charles, Brinkley Francis, Britton Dorothy, Calthrop, Lieutenant Colonel R.F., Seidel Eric, Chamberlain Basil Hall, Craigie Sir Robert, Daniels Frank and Otome, Davidson Sir Colin, Denning Sir Esler, Denning Walter, Dickens F.V., Frederick Victor, Dunn Charles J., Elliot Sir Charles, Faulds Henry, Gardner Kenneth, Gubbins J.H., Hall John Carey, Hawley Frank, Kennedy Malcolm, Lloyd Arthur, Longford Joseph, McEwen John R., Mills Douglas, Mitford A.B., Munro Gordon, O'Neill P.G., Parker Sir Peter, Parks Sir Harry, Piggott Major General FSG, Pilcher Sir John, Redmond Sir Vere, Riddle Hannah, Sansom Sir George, Sato Sir Ernest, that's my particular interest, Sir Ernest Sato, Shand W.J., Shaw Alexander Croft, Stopes Marie, Story Richard, Whaley Arthur, War C.F., and Weston Walter. Okay. I think I shall stop the share at this point. And just to conclude this video introducing the book, it's very clear that Sir Hugh CORTAZZI had the national interest in mind throughout his introduction to the book. which is what one would expect from somebody who fought for Britain in the Second World War and studied Japanese, I think, during the same war, as part of the national effort to defeat Japan. Well, it's I think it's a very interesting book. It may be, of course, slightly out of date now, because when 2016 it was published, and we're almost 10 years from that now. So things may have happened since then, some good, some bad. Life moves on a bit. But as regards the history of Japanese studies, which perhaps I might tackle in a subsequent video, read Peter Kornicki's chapter perhaps. Of course, things are less likely to change in any great way. So I look forward to reading that next time. I may not read any more than that, because although I've had specific permission from Peter Kornicki to read that particular chapter, I haven't talked to any of the other contributors, so I probably won't do more than read that next chapter, or that first chapter, I should say, next time. So thank you very much if you've persevered with me thus far. And since it is now just before Christmas 2025, I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you indeed. And if you would like to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, of course, that would be very welcome. Thank you and goodbye.